Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Jewish Baseball Odyssey with Jon de Marte. My name is Mark Faber, and I'm the Vice Chair of Nickel City Jews. We're so thankful to have the Buffalo Jewish Federation, the Jewish Community Center, and Temple Beth Tzedek for partnering with us on this event. I also want to thank Rabbi Adam Rosenbaum for facilitating the conversation with Jon. But before we turn it over to Rabbi Rosenbaum, I'm going to invite Jon to tell us his story.
All right. Thanks for joining, everyone. My name is Jonathan de Marte. I'm new to Buffalo, and first want to say thank you guys so much for the continued support that the community has given me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, my baseball story, and kind of everything that I've been through along the way and how that's gotten me to where I am today with the Chicago Cubs and also with Team Israel. So first of all, I grew up in Westchester County, New York, in Yorktown Heights. I was bar mitzvahed at Temple Beth Am in Yorktown Heights and played for Lakeland High School. After 4 years playing at Lakeland and having a pretty successful high school career where I thought I was going to advance through the ranks and start my professional career at this point, I committed to University of Richmond pretty early early on in my junior year. And all I wanted to do was after not getting drafted out of high school, all I thought about was playing professional baseball and how long it would take me to get there and basically do my 3 years in college and get out. And as soon as I got to University of Richmond, started to endure numerous injuries, most specifically, I think 3 weeks in, I suffered my first injury, which ended up actually sidelining me for my entire first season. And this was a pattern that continued throughout my college baseball career. So 4 years as an undergrad student playing college ball at University of Richmond, I suffered 5 surgeries and numerous injuries that sidelined me for most of my time, which gave me 2 extra years of postgraduate eligibility while playing college baseball. So professional baseball was something that kind of was taken off of the radar for myself. I basically did everything that I possibly could after every single injury and surgery to do whatever I can to get back on the field. And I kept finding myself in the same pattern of, all right, I get injured, I have surgery, I work as hard as I possibly can to get better and find myself back on the field. And then the same pattern would continue. So this is where a passion of mine, which is in the player development sector, and one of the reasons that brought me here to Buffalo with a new job and a new opportunity working at youth baseball players and pitchers at a certain facility, is the area of player development and helping players reach their full potential as a ball player. And that's something that I found a lot of passion and interest in because of how much it's helped my career. And it's something that I think most youth baseball players should start at an earlier age. So took many years for me to get to that point. After all these injuries, I actually said, all right, I'm done pitching and I want to do everything that I possibly can to salvage my college baseball career. And I ended up switching over and becoming a position player again. So for my 5th and 6th year, those were my grad school years of college, I actually became a position player, played first base, played third base for University of Richmond. And then in my 6th year, found myself back on the mound again. And I come back to the player development side of things because I knew that everything that I was doing over the years, although I worked as hard as I possibly could, was not working and was not the answer to get me where I wanted to be, back on the field, being the best that I can be, and maybe being a professional prospect again. So beyond making the transformation back to an infielder and hitter, in my 6th and final year of college baseball, being in grad school, I made the transition back to a pitcher again. I had a very successful year. Thought again I was going to either get drafted or sign a free agent contract. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So I found myself in independent ball, which is essentially, for those of you that are not familiar, it's semi-professional. It's non-affiliated professional baseball. So you're still paid to play. Many guys still make a career of it and try to go the international route or do whatever they can to use independent ball to help them get into an organization or with a major league team. So After my 6th year in college, I had was waiting, hoping to get drafted or hoping to sign a free agent contract with a major league organization. That did not happen, and I had a few opportunities to go play independent ball. I signed with the normal Corn Belters of the Frontier League. I played there for 2017 and then most of 2018, where in 2018 I was traded from normal to the York Revolution, which are in the Atlantic League. So I played in the Atlantic League for York in the end of 2018 and then the beginning of 2019, where I was released from York and went to I was released from York and signed with the Quebec Capitales of the Can-Am Professional Baseball League. So that was kind of my independent ball track. And now I'm going to go back a little bit to 2018, or actually 2017, where Israel baseball comes into play. So I will never forget. I forget to tell this sometimes when I do some of these talks, but I will never forget randomly during my final year of grad school, I woke up in the middle of the night one night, couldn't sleep, turned on MLB Network, and there was a replay of Team Israel qualifying for the World Baseball Classic in Brooklyn. I think that those qualifiers happened in 2016. I'm not exactly sure, but I saw this and I was like, oh my God, I had no idea that Israel had a baseball team. Like, this is pretty cool. Fast forward to this World Baseball Classic in 2017. And my college baseball team was playing at University of Texas. And I remember being up one night and I decided to turn on the World Baseball Classic, and I watched most of Israel's games. I remember watching Israel play against the Netherlands. And I said, oh my God, like when I'm done, if I play professional baseball, this is something I would love to be a part of. Like I'd love to wear Israel on my chest and represent Jews all over the world. And sure enough, in 2018, the manager I had at the time while playing for the normal Corn Belters asked me and other guys if they were interested in playing winter ball internationally. I immediately said I'd love to play for Team Israel. This is something I've always wanted to do. He was like, all right, let me see what I can do and I'll get back to you. Luckily, this manager was friends with Gabe Kapler, who was involved with Israel baseball for a while, managed the Phillies, managing the Giants now. Literally the next day, I get a phone call from my manager and he says, hey, you're going to get a call from someone with Israeli baseball. I think they'd be interested in having you. So I literally get a call the next morning from the manager of Team Israel. His name is Eric Holtz, who also is from Westchester County, where I'm from. And he basically called me and said, Johnny, like, you might not know who I am, but I know who you are. He also guy from Westchester. So he said he followed my high school career. His son is a year older than me. So I played against his son in high school and actually made my first college start against his son, who played for Bucknell. And he said, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that you were Jewish because of your last name. And if you're healthy and willing to play, we would love to have you on the team. I just had no idea that you were still playing professionally, and I had no idea that you were Jewish. So he decided to take me on as be a part of the team. He said, there's one catch. You have to become a citizen of Israel. I said, okay, tell me what's next. What do I have to do? And started my Aliyah process the next day and did everything that it took to become a citizen. So after that season ended in 2018, when I began this process, myself and 9 other guys that are a part of this team took a trip to Israel, finalized our citizenship, and had an amazing trip put on by the IAB, the Israeli Association of Baseball, where they toured us around, treated us so well. We got to work numerous clinics and camps, get to know some of the youth baseball players in Israel. You know, one thing we realized was that they are severely under, there's not many resources, there's not many fields in Israel. And as a part of this process, they're doing everything they can to build more fields, grow the game there, get more kids involved in baseball in Israel. And that is part of our responsibility, is helping grow the game there, reach as many people as we possibly can, and let them know that there is baseball going on in Israel. But we have to do everything we can to help the game grow there, help bring more resources there, help raise more money so that they can get more baseballs, get more equipment, build more fields, and make the fields that they have a little bit nicer and more up to standards with what we have in America. So I had this amazing trip, met these guys who are still my good friends today. But at the time, it was like, all right, it's 2018. The qualifiers aren't until 2019. We have to win 20 or 17 to 20 games to make it to the Olympics. Like, the Olympics were just so far away for us and just like a blimp of our imaginations. And before we knew it, I found myself I left Quebec multiple times last year in 2019 to go play for Team Israel. So we started in Bulgaria. We won a tournament in Bulgaria. We beat Bulgaria, Serbia, Russia twice, Ireland, blanking out on some of the other ones. But after that tournament, we went to Lithuania, played a best 2 of 3 series with Lithuania. We won that series, which made us the champions of Pool B, of the European Pool B pool for last year. And by doing that, that advanced us to Pool A, which were the technical Olympic qualifiers. So a few weeks later, I was able to leave my team in Quebec again and fly to Germany to, again, help us with the push towards the Olympics. We needed to place top 5 in Germany in order to advance to the final qualifiers, which we did. And from there, we flew to Italy, and we beat Spain, we beat the Netherlands, we beat Italy, and then we beat South Africa to finally qualify for the first spot in what was supposed to be the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. It was insane to me how, when this whole thing started, we weren't even thinking about the Olympics. We were just thinking about playing for the Israeli national team, doing the best that we possibly could, and hopefully earning a spot on the World Baseball Classic roster for what was supposed to be next year. As this process went along, we got closer and closer to the Olympics, added more guys. It became much more of a realistic vision for us. And I will say something about being a part of this team. I don't necessarily believe in as much of the team chemistry side of baseball, and the kind of the things that the part of the game that goes into that. But when you have a small sample size and in tournament play, everything goes from hustling out a ground ball in the infield to beat out a play at first base, to laying out on a ground ball in the hole, whatever that is. All of this stuff plays in a smaller sample size tournament setting. And I have never been a part of a team where everybody has pulled so hard for each other. Like, the camaraderie and the relationships that we had with one another were something that I'd never experienced in professional baseball before. And one thing that really stuck with me was Danny Valencia, our third baseman, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard of before. I think he had a 9 or 10-year big league career. I'll never forget game 1 of the qualifiers in Germany, hearing him say like that he had never wanted to win a game so badly and had never played to win this same way in his life. When you play professional baseball, you're not playing to win. Once you sign out of college or out of indie ball like I did, it's all about individual development and doing what it takes to make the organization look as good as possible and work your way to the big leagues. So for a lot of us, this was the first time, unless you're playing playoff baseball, the first time that you're really, really playing to win. So to hear that from a major league all-star, major league veteran like Danny was for me such a humbling moment, where it was like, wow, I get to represent Jews all over the world. I get to represent the state of Israel, and I get to play alongside guys like this who have a very, very, very fantastic major league careers, and I'm a part of this, and I get to play on an international stage and wear Israel across my chest. So that's just some stuff with being a part of Team Israel. I'm sure some more will come up in question. So basically, after we qualified for the Olympics, I had a very short off season last year, where then I signed with the Perth Heat in the Australian Baseball League, where I got to go in the early part of this year and play for about a month and a half for Perth in the Australian Baseball League. From there, I flew to Israel. Had to do some health stuff, some physical work so that we could get cleared to play in the Olympics. And then from there, I flew straight to Arizona and had some workouts with major league teams, where I signed with the Chicago Cubs in February of this year. Spent a few weeks in spring training, and then COVID-19 hit and forced us to quarantine and basically simulate a season on our own. So that's a lot about my baseball journey right there. I'm sure there's a lot of blanks that we can fill in here with questions from you guys and anything that you might have to or would like to learn about. So thank you so much for listening, and I guess we'll move on to what's next.
So, Jonathan, first of all, thank you so much for your introduction to your life in baseball and to your experiences for playing for the Israel national team, and we'll get into all that. I should say very quickly, obviously this time is about you, but just as you're decked out in your Israel jersey, I've got Cubs gear because Jonathan and I have spoken before, and I'm a lifelong Cubs fan myself, so I'd be happy to root for you regardless. But the fact that you're playing for the Cubs organization is certainly icing on the cake. So it's a thrill to be here with you. I guess I'd like to ask a little bit, and by the way, questions. I know there are going to be questions that are going to come in on the chat on YouTube, so feel free to ask away, and it'll hopefully as many questions as possible will be communicated to me through the Zoom that we're working on right now. If we could start with just the question of, you spoke a little bit about your upbringing. Where did your love of baseball? How was that developed? In your childhood, and was it intertwined in any way in your Jewish background?
Yeah, I played baseball, soccer, basketball, did taekwondo growing up, but for me, it was always my immediate passion was always with baseball. From a young age, I can remember that there's no better feeling than striking out the last batter of an inning and walking off the mound knowing that you defeated the opposition, or hitting a ball in the gap or over and at the outfielder's heads or over the fence and getting to trot around the bases. So for me, I just always thought that was the most rewarding feeling that I had ever felt. I love the preparation that goes into baseball. I always love batting practice, taking extra ground balls and fly balls. And now as a pitcher, there's a lot more that goes into it. But for me, it really started from a young age. I started playing travel ball and kind of traveling around the East Coast, Southeast, ever since I was 8 or 9 years old. And I never really was burnt out like you see happen to a lot of youth ball players today. It was something that I always loved waking up and doing every single day and doing everything that I needed to on the field. And I always strive to find ways that would help me reach my full potential as a ball player. So that competitive side of the game is something that always kept me going. And I just always thought the unique skill of hitting a round ball with a round bat was something that is so much different than other sports, and can be so much more challenging in some ways. It's something that always drew me in. And I guess to tie in the Jewish upbringing, I know you and I have spoken about this on the phone. At a younger age, the tie for me was a little bit different. All I wanted to do was play baseball, and I was that annoying kid that would show up to Sunday school or Wednesday night Hebrew school before I was old enough to transition to Sundays. And I was that kid that would show up in muddy cleats and baseball pants and showing up late or leaving early. And for me, I really wish it was something that I was more mentally involved in from a young age. But again, this was something that was always a part of my life. So for the thinking back on it, the conflicts that came up between baseball and Hebrew school were something that were kind of difficult to navigate as a young age because I played so much. And thinking back on it, I really wish that I had put more time into the Hebrew school side of it and paid more attention on that end. But for me, rejoining this team really kind of reignited that spark in my mind and the connection that I feel with Jewish communities around the country, and trying to get more involved with groups like you guys are something that really mean a lot to me. And to see guys in Israel who are Jewish and have this extremely high passion for the game, but the resources are not what we have here, really ignites a spark in me to want to help as much as possible. Like, one part of being Jewish, the sense of community is so important, and everybody opening up their homes or opening up whatever you need as a Jewish person to help those out in need is something that I'm really taking as a responsibility for being a part of this team. I mean, we have younger ball players in Israel that reach out to us all the time asking for help. And those are guys that I really try to prioritize because I know that they don't have the same level of coaching that we have here and the same level of knowledge. So I would like to basically make it a responsibility of my own to do everything I can to help the game grow there and help these kids who don't have what we have. And for me right now, since being a citizen of Israel, I'm trying to do everything that I can to reconnect with my Jewish roots and get involved in communities. And now this new community that I'm calling home here in Buffalo that you guys have been so welcoming with me for.
Well, first of all, it's terrific. Obviously, we're glad to have you here in Buffalo. And sure, I guess I want to say, first of all, when it comes to, being the kid who showed up in the muddy cleats to religious school and things like that, or had to leave early or show up later, what have you. Obviously, there was enough planted within you to be interested and to be intrigued and excited about the opportunity to play for Team Israel. Obviously, there was enough inside you for you to do that. So, so that's certainly worth appreciating and respecting. So obviously, you've played literally all around the world. I mean, it sounds like on several continents, so I think we touched upon this briefly when we spoke on the phone, but when it obviously playing for Team Israel and other places, or even just as yourself, I imagine from time to time you would have heard or experienced some anti-Semitic remarks or other things. So when you have, how have you dealt with it, and how have you worked through those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, we're asked this question a lot, pretty much on every single call that we get. And I will say I have not experienced, especially since being involved with this team, any anti-Semitism. A lot of people expected us to kind of experience some stuff playing all over Europe, but I've never experienced anything like that. It was a little bit weird to be a part of this team and then have security traveling around with you everywhere you go. Every location we go to, we were not allowed off the buses because security is searching the premise, searching under the buses, searching under all the cars around us. And same rules applied before entering a bus. We're not allowed to leave our hotels or any of our location because of the extreme security measures that are being taken to protect us from anything that could happen. So that was something that was a little bit different experience for me. I have never experienced anti-Semitism, and I can say from talking to most guys on the team, most of them have not. A lot of these guys grew up in communities that had a lot more Jewish people than what I was used to. One thing I will say that I experienced was probably a lot of ignorance towards Jews. I mean, playing in the Midwest, there were people who did not even know what it meant to be Jewish. Living in Richmond, Virginia, all these years, one of the locations that I gave lessons in, people literally did not know what the religion was. So for me, it was kind of trying to find ways to explain to people that we are no different from you. We're no different from anybody else. Just maybe the way that we practice our religion is just a little bit different, but I've never experienced any anti-Semitism at all. I mean, it's just honestly people not knowing what we stand for, why there's so few Jews in the world, and trying to educate them on as to maybe the history of our religion.
So when you went to Israel, so had you gone to Israel prior to the beginning of the Aliyah process? Had you had the opportunity to be there before?
No, but so some interesting stuff about that. Right before all this, my sister actually did her birthright to Israel, and she was supposed to study abroad, I think in London the next year, and she ended up last minute changing her study abroad from London to Israel because she loved her birthright experience so much. So I started to learn a bit about the culture and the differences that you that like maybe what you see living in Tel Aviv versus what we hear in the media being in America, what it's like living in Israel, because she had the time of her life, absolutely loved the way that she was treated by people there and how welcoming people in Tel Aviv were. So that was one thing that really made me want to do my birthright. But then as soon as the time came for that is when my opportunity to get my citizenship happened. So no, I had never been to Israel before that, but my sister went for a whole semester. My mom went to visit her, and both of my brothers have now done their birthright in Israel. So I've actually been twice now, for the Aliyah trip in 2018, and then again when I went earlier this year after playing in Australia and before signing with the Cubs. So that was my first experience being in Israel, and hopefully things change with COVID-19 there and here so that we have another opportunity to go back before playing in the Olympics.
You mentioned that part of your expectations as a member of Team Israel is to help grow the game in Israel, and so tell us a little bit more about what that entails and how long of the commitment do you have to do that? Is it something that is only while you're on the team? Is it something that is supposed to stretch beyond your time on the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as a lifetime commitment by becoming a citizen and being a part of this team that is impacting Israeli sport in a way that it's never been impacted before. I mean, we're the first team to represent Israel in the Olympics since, I believe, 1976. It's either 72 or 76. I'm not sure. So I see it as a lifelong commitment for myself. I've also thrown the idea around of living there for a certain amount of time to do everything that I can in regards to helping educate kids on baseball there. And then from the player development perspective, teaching them what I teach to kids here in the US to help them reach their full potential. So for us, it's basically, I don't know what it would have looked up like without COVID, but I have done many calls like this throughout the pandemic to basically educate our audience and our following on our team, who and what our team is made up of. And besides playing in the Olympics, playing in the World Baseball Classic and trying to win a medal, the other part of it is, like I said, growing the game there. So basically there are fundraising efforts from the JNF, Jewish National Fund, that we are doing to help raise money both for our trip to Tokyo, but also to, like I said before, grow the fields there, make the field, update the fields, build more. But I mean, also from an equipment perspective, they're very slim on baseballs, gloves, bats. It's a lot harder to get that stuff shipped to Israel. So basically letting people like you guys know that there is baseball going on there and that they need help. So anything from sending equipment overseas to donating to the JNF to help grow our baseball community there, to giving talks like this and just letting you guys know who our team is made up of, who we're representing, and how passionate we are about playing baseball and getting to wear Israel on our chests while we're playing baseball. I mean, I think one thing that this can also help do for Jews all around the world is find a way to kind of unite everybody through sport. I mean, as a minority group all over the world, I think that if we can bring everyone together through something as powerful as sport on a stage as big as the Olympics, it's going to unite Jews both in America and Israel, and then all over the world, kind of bring people together to give us something to root for in a way that they're not used to. I think that judo, gymnastics, some of those are the bigger sports in Israel, but none of those have a team with 20 to 30 guys that are involved in helping spread this game and spread the word that there is baseball going on in Israel. So I think that's kind of a loose explanation of our responsibility as being a part of this team. Like I said, every time I've gone there and worked with guys, I don't want to leave the field. Like, we find ourselves leaving the field at darkness because these kids' eyes just like light up when they're looking at you and like listening to you talk and try to teach them, because it's a level of teaching that they've never gotten before. So you know that they're so excited to get into to have the educating that we're giving them. And I mean, just for them to see guys that they're following both online and on TV playing ball in the US. And then for us to be able to go there and actually impact them in person is something that I'd like to be able to do when my playing career is over, or maybe for a week or two time periods during every off season while I'm playing.
All right. Well, it's amazing. I remember hearing when I was growing up that they had just begun playing Little League. They had tried to form a Little League in Israel. This must have been, I think, sometime in the 1980s. And they had 4 teams, and one of the teams was called the Jerusalem Schleppers. I'm not making that up. That was so. In other words, baseball in Israel has come a long way, obviously. Yeah. One of the questions we've gotten was from Rob Goldberg of the Federation. We'd like to know what was the most powerful moment for you as a pitcher for Team Israel? Was there a particular time that it just hit home what this all meant, what it all meant to you?
Yeah. I mean, for anybody here that followed our journey, I'm sure you're going to know what my answer is. But I was lucky enough that I was able to pitch in some pretty high leverage opportunities. But the most important to me was I got to, in Germany, against Germany, it was a must-win game. By winning this game, it put us in a position where we had to win one more to make the playoffs of the round in Germany. So essentially, beating Germany put us 2 wins away from the final qualifier. And I came in a tie ball game in the 8th inning and got out of it in the 8th inning, gave up no runs. In the 9th inning, the leadoff batter, again, a must-win game in Germany against Germany. And the 9th inning, the leadoff batter hit a single to right field, 2-base error. I think our right fielder bobbled the ball or it went through his legs. So there's a runner on third, no outs, bottom of the 9th. Obviously, if he scores, walk off, game over. Germany wins. We have to climb out of a hole to make it to the net to try to advance. And if we win, we're 2 wins away. So runner on third, no outs. I think the first guy struck out. Next guy hit a bloop to shortstop, 2 outs. And then the last batter of that inning was maybe a 10 to 15 pitch at bat, just foul ball after foul ball after foul ball. And eventually the guy hit a slow roller to first base. I got out of the inning and we put up, I think, a 2 or 3 spot in the next inning and ended up winning the game. So for me to be on the mound in such an important situation against Germany, in Germany, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think any Israeli sports teams had played in Germany since 1972. So knowing the history and knowing what happened in Munich, being on the mound, not that anybody on the opposing team was involved in anything that happened in World War II, but just knowing the history between Israel and Germany and then having the opportunity to be a part of a game where we defeated Germany was something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And that was probably one of the greatest moments of my baseball career.
It sounds like, I mean, it's an amazing moment. And especially when you're describing that, 10, 15 pitch at bat where just the tension rises as if the tension in the game wasn't high enough. That's baseball sort of at its sort of thickest drama. So it feels amazing. I'm sure it feels amazing to be on the winning side of that. My goodness. Your time in Israel, what surprised you most about Israel? What little things do you come to your mind when it comes to that?
Everyone speaking English, for me at first was eye-opening. I knew that English was going to be a common language there, but I didn't realize that everybody was going to be speaking English and that it wasn't really going to be much of a problem communicating. I also, when you think of Israel, you think about, or at least when I did beforehand, you think of like the desert and just not really a city like Tel Aviv. And my first trip, actually both of my trips, most of my time was spent in Tel Aviv. So I just did not realize that I'd never been to a city where you have high rises just lined up with the ocean like that. So you're literally, it's like sand, street, and then you're have the city right there behind you. And I'd never seen anything like that. So I was amazed at the beauty of it. And for me, really just the way that we were respected, but from the way that we felt respect from everybody that we met all around Israel, especially people who understood our team. And then you'd go places and they'd be like, oh, do you play basketball? Or, oh, do you play football? Why are you here? And then people would have no idea that there was a baseball team in Israel. So for me, I thought that qualifying for the Olympics, like people would know that Israel is sending a team to the Olympics. And it was definitely eye-opening and surprising that people did not know about this. So that was something that stood out to me. And also, I mean, it was just the most beautiful country I've ever seen. Even when I got to travel to areas outside of the city, like we went to Haifa, I was in Rosh Hanikra, I'm blanking out on some, Jerusalem, of course, was one of the most powerful feeling places I'd ever been to. Just when you kind of step foot into that city, for those of you who have not been there before, it's like a overwhelming feeling of just like power around you. When you kind of hear the call to worship going on at the same time, it's like, oh my God, where am I? Like, this is the birthplace of everything here. Like, this place is incredible. So yeah, I mean, those are just some things that really stood out to me throughout my visits there. And I hope I get the chance to go back sometime soon.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's obviously travel has been so challenging lately, and we have a question here from Linda Barrett who asks, were you part of the Heading Home documentary about the Israeli national team? Were you in that?
No. So that was when I talked about the World Baseball Classic in 2017. That was made about that team, and I was still in college then and not a part of that team. But there will be a Heading Home part 2 about our journey to the Olympics. So about this team that I am a part of. And I don't know how much I'll be in that. Unfortunately, when I was playing in Australia, our entire team took a trip to Israel where they did some of the stuff that I touched on before that I had to do on my way back from Australia. So I missed a lot of the filming for Heading Home part 2, but I'm sure there'll be clips and whatnot from our journey to the Olympics. But ironically enough, I found out after Heading Home was released and after my mom and I went to a synagogue in Manhattan to see a showing of Heading Home, I found out that the director was actually from my Temple Beth Am in Yorktown Heights. So I've gotten to know him pretty well since that first movie was released, and I know he's taking the lead on the next documentary. So there will be a second version coming out. And a lot of the guys that were in Heading Home 1 are still involved or playing on Team Israel, or people that I've gotten to know. Like, if you've heard of one guy who's in the documentary a lot, Josh Zayed, he was one of the main pitchers in the World Baseball Classic. And he's actually now a pitching coach in the Cubs organization. So I've gotten to know him pretty well since joining the Cubs. Our minor league pitching coordinator, Craig Breslow, played for Team Israel in the qualifiers in years before. So no, I was not a part of that documentary, but I will be a part of the next one. After being a part of this team for so long now, I've kind of learned a lot about what went on at the WBC, everything leading up to that, and what it's done for this organization since.
Absolutely, and that's something that we can look forward to. God willing, especially hopefully you would take it through the Olympic experience, God willing, next year in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you talked about what it means to pitch with Israel on your chest, and how much it means, especially playing in Germany and in other places such as that. Talk for a moment about what it means. Obviously, when we think of Jewish Major League Baseball players, we take a great deal of pride in, the handful who made it to the Hall of Fame, or who reached stardom. But obviously, the list isn't huge, compared to that of other religious groups. Do you think much about what it means to be a Jew? Playing professional baseball, playing on such a high level. Does that run through your mind? And if so, what do you think about?
Yeah, I remember the first time that I saw my name on this website that had like all Jewish, I'm not sure if it's baseball players or professional athletes. like that stood out to me. Like, wow, you're not just an American professional baseball player, like you're an Israeli American professional baseball player. So you get to not only represent people here, but you get to represent a religion that's all over the world. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's as like I said, as someone who has not experienced anti-Semitism directly, I know that people do on a daily basis all over the world. I've heard things said to other people that obviously make me uncomfortable, or things that you should jump in on and educate people on why what they said is wrong and why it should not be said. So if, like I think I've touched on this before, but I take a great responsibility in when I hear things that are said, trying to educate people on why, like, what is being said is not necessarily true, and why you might be misinformed on why you believe in what you believe. So yeah, I mean, for me, I think having the opportunity to bring this group of people together and bring Jews all over the world together and root for something through sport and find a common denominator that can connect Jewish communities all over the world is something that I'm taking a lot of pride in right now, and that I hope to continue throughout the rest of my playing career, both in Israel and here in the United States, through talks like this, and throughout the rest of my life.
Fantastic. I mean, you spoke about the camaraderie of Team Israel, and that it's a camaraderie unlike anything that you've experienced. Maybe if you'd be willing to share a little bit more about what that was like, and and how that camaraderie felt so unique compared to all the other teams you played for.
Yeah. So basically, like, when my college baseball team, we only made it to a conference tournament a handful of times during my long college baseball career. So never getting the chance to play to win was something that I had really missed. So what I will say about that is, again, I think that not all this stuff matters in a larger sample size, but it was our few weeks in Germany and Italy, to me, felt like we were there for months, and I had the time of my life, but everything was about winning and advancing to the Olympics. And playing professional baseball, you deal with people from all over the country and all over the world that grow up with different, they have much different upbringings, have much different beliefs from one another. And being a bullpen pitcher, a lot of my time is spent hanging out in the bullpen, having conversations and making small talk for hours and hours until your name is called to pitch. So you can imagine, with people that come from these different backgrounds with much different beliefs and viewpoints, some of the conversations that happen, and they're not exactly things that you would like to hear. So being a part of this team, those conversations did not happen. There was no negativity that went on. We were all pulling for one another. We were all friends. We're all representing families who have a very similar connection. Like I keep saying, we're representing people all over the world that are coming together to support this team. So for me, it was like, there were times in the dugout where I would sit there and think, like, wow, there are so many people supporting me right now, people that I don't know at all that have become huge supporters of myself and this organization. So it was just like that. It was like a feeling of comfort and knowing that everybody was here for the same exact reason, and we all had the same motivations behind this, to make it to the Olympics and help grow the game in Israel. That's kind of that sense of camaraderie that I felt. And it wasn't like, in professional baseball, when you're done, you kind of go hang out in your groups later on that night or hang out with your roommate. It was big groups of us were hanging out together in the hotel lobby, going out to eat with with other families and people that were there. I mean, it was a connection that was so great that once we finished and qualified for the Olympics, was something that you just didn't want to end. I wanted to kind of stay there and have this continue, because there was just so much positivity going around, and we accomplished something that seemed like a miracle at first. So yeah, that's kind of that's the connection that I felt throughout this whole time.
All right, so kind of piggybacking off of that, Randall Schnorr would like to know, were there any observant Jews on the team, and did some players learn more about being Jewish by being on the team? Did you ever talk about that?
Yes. I think most guys were observing Jews on the team. I'd say most of us were, almost all of us were bar mitzvahed. And so basically, I think our roster for the Olympics is somewhere between 24 and 26. 4 guys were born in Israel. The rest of us were born in the United States and got our citizenship sometime in the last few years. But for those guys that did not grow up going to Hebrew school and were not bar mitzvahed, I think for them it was more of a religious learning experience. While for the rest of us, I know like I asked a lot of questions about what life is like living in Israel on a daily basis, like what it's like going to school, what it's like playing baseball, knowing that when you get to a certain age, you have to serve in the military, and that only a handful of athletes each year get this special permission where they can leave their military service so that they can go practice their sport. So you know that there's going to be a deadline at some point where your career is probably going to be put on hold, which makes it almost impossible to become a professional baseball player in the US, and makes it even harder to go get a scholarship and go play and get permission to go play in the United States. So I think, yeah, there was definitely a learning experience for some guys. I can remember one in particular questioning one of the Israeli-born guys a lot just about what life was like growing up as an athlete, like what it was like growing up in Israel, just some of the requirements that they had in their schooling, just some of the setup of the government and how much different it is from ours here. So yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways it was a learning experience for a lot of us. When I made Aliyah in 2018, a lot of those guys had done their birthright or had family in Israel and had already been there numerous times. So these people were very familiar with the layout of the land already and had some experiences. I never went away to any Jewish camp, like Jewish summer camps or anything. And I've come to learn that that's something that's very common in our community. So just kind of learning what life was like in that upbringing was for me something that was new to me and very eye-opening. And then for the very few guys on the team that were not bar mitzvah or were not observing and practicing as much, I think that they really had the opportunity to learn a lot.
You know, and so just piggybacking off of that, I'm going to refer to a question from Ellis Warbo, who asks, and you touched upon some of this already, but maybe expand a little. Ellis asks, you mentioned in the beginning about the Aliyah process. What is involved in the process, and how is it different than a non-athlete making Aliyah, such as military service? Do you have much of a sense about that?
Yeah, we did not have any military requirements because of our ages. None of us made Aliyah at age 19 or 20 or 21. We were all a little bit older. And basically the requirement for making Aliyah, to my knowledge, was if you were Jewish enough to be persecuted during the Holocaust, you're Jewish enough to become a citizen of Israel. So for me, it was very straightforward, getting a letter from my rabbi, basically saying that I am Jewish and I was bar mitzvahed and my family is a member of Temple Beth Am in Yorktown Heights. I know there was a lot more paperwork and things that went into it, with basically confirming that you were a member of this temple, confirming that you were bar mitzvahed, confirming that you grew up here, and just essentially showing that you're Jewish. But for me, I mean, the process was pretty straightforward because I was born and raised Jewish. There were no loopholes or anything that had to be gone through. And I don't think our process was any different from anyone else, besides the fact that maybe it was expedited a little bit for our first trip.
So I'm going to combine a couple of questions now. So Richard Collins asks, tell us about your current role, which I think is going to go into the next, which is another question from Ellis Werbo, where he asked, with the signing with the Cubs and then commitments in Australia, once play does resume and the Olympics take place, how will you still be able to leave the Cubs and then to go play for Israel? How are you planning to balance these many commitments?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask about our practices as a team. Baseball is a very individualized sport where your development, your work is done on your own time. So because most of us are either with organizations, playing independent ball, or training for the Olympics, we're doing things on our own. And there was supposed to be this year in 2020 a training camp in July that would have stretched from New York, Massachusetts, I think Maryland, New Jersey. We would have played games against college, like Cape Cod League teams. I think maybe some minor league teams, I'm not entirely sure, and a bunch of independent ball teams. So there would have been a training camp before the Olympics where most of us would have been there if your organization allowed it or if wherever you're playing allowed it. For me, when I signed with the Cubs and I had my initial phone call, the first thing that our director of player development said to me was that you have permission to go to the Olympics. This is a great opportunity for you and the organization, and we would never stop you from doing something like this. And when COVID happened and everything and the Olympics were pushed back, I immediately called him and said, what changes? And he said to me, nothing changes. You still have permission from us to go. You just might be faced with a much tougher decision than you would have been faced with this year. So, I mean, if all goes well, who knows what happens? It kind of depends on your standing within the organization, whether or not you want to go. I 100% wholeheartedly plan on going to the Olympics and participating for Israel. The only thing that could get in the way of that is the potential of being on a 40-man roster or being in the big leagues. I have no idea what's going to happen there, but the Cubs are completely on board with me going to play. And I believe that everybody else that's a part of our team has the same permission from their organizations as well, except for who I'm sure some of you heard of recently, Dean Kramer, who is the first Israeli-born ball player to make it to the big leagues and will be in the Orioles starting rotation next year. So odds are he will not be joining us in the Olympics. But I myself will be able to, and the Cubs have given me full permission to go ahead and do so. I do not know if I will be able to participate in the full training camp, but I hope to be able to be there for as much as possible.
Well, look, I would certainly hope that Theo Epstein, another member of the tribe, would be understanding. So so I'm very glad about that. A couple more questions here. So David Kahn, I'm going to just quote here. In the darkest of dark days at Richmond, when it seemed like there was no light at the end of the tunnel, did you always know in the back of your mind that you were still capable of throwing 95 miles per hour?
Well, thanks, David.
It sounds like you know him.
I do. He he played ball at University of Richmond for, I believe, a year or two. Big Team Israel follower and member of the New Orleans Jewish community. No, I did not, honestly. After all the injuries and kind of everything that I went through, all I wanted to do was get back on the field and play and just kind of salvage my horrible college baseball career that was at that time. Professional baseball really did not become anything on my radar until my last year of graduate school, when I started to see gains and increases in my velocity and my status and my performance on the field. So no, that was not something I expected. But as I started to get healthy again, started to make changes to my body in the way that I delivered the baseball on the mound, it kind of was like, all right, well, there is still something here. There's something that I've never also seen before, completely changed the way that I throw. And for those of you like David that saw me probably pre-injuries and now post-injuries, I'm a completely different ball player. So at first, no, I did not expect any of that to happen. But through my research, my development, and the changes that I made, it slowly became something that I realized throughout the end of my college career.
All right, so we just have a couple more minutes, so I'd like to kind of clean up the last of the handful of questions. I believe that you already answered Ariel Kostener's question of how many Israeli-born players are on the team. You said 4, that's correct?
4, and then if Dean Kramer is able to play with us, it would be 5.
All right, terrific. And then I guess a good way to wrap it up is to kind of get a clarification from Richard Collins, who wants to know about your what you foresee your involvement in the Buffalo community will be, and of course, Rob wants to hear a little bit about your early impressions of Buffalo.
Yeah, I love it so far. I've been treated extremely well by everyone that I've met. through my girlfriend's community here in Buffalo. They have all been extremely welcoming and accepting of me and made this feel like a new home for me. I hope that I can do more things like this for the Jewish community of Buffalo and try to bring light to everything that our team and organization is doing to bring awareness to this team and the growing game in Israel. But I mean, my first impressions are great. I haven't dealt with any snowfall yet. It's not too cold. I'm sitting up in, I think it's called the Seneca Towers now. And I have a beautiful view of Lake Erie, the KeyBank Center. And I've loved it. I mean, like I said, I've been welcomed with open arms, and I was told that this city and this community, it's something that they're known for. And I've definitely noticed that to the fullest extent. I hope that I can do, like I said, do more things have more opportunities like this to educate the Jewish community on that there is baseball going on in there. And that's one thing that we're trying to do. And yeah, I mean, my girlfriend and I are slowly settling into a new place in the East Amherst area. So getting away from the city a little bit. But it's an area that's closer to the baseball facility that I'll be training and working at. So for those of you who have not heard of Hot Corner, that's where I'll be spending most of my time here this off season. So if anybody would like to pop in and take a look, we're going through some pretty amazing renovations right now to grow the marriage of strength and conditioning and baseball into one place. So I definitely recommend checking that out. And yeah, I mean, just trying to explore and experience as much as I possibly can in a new city. I never saw myself living anywhere this north, but I could not be anywhere this far north, but I could not be happier to be here and try to become a part of this community.
Well, listen, it's wonderful to hear, and I'm sure that I speak for everyone watching right now that this has been a fascinating time getting to know you and getting to know your story up to this point. And I will just conclude by saying, first of all, go Cubs, go Team Israel. And please know that we, the Jewish community, are here for you. I'll give a quick plug. Temple Beth Tzedek is certainly willing and ready to welcome you and your girlfriend with open arms. And we are so glad to have the opportunity to continue following your Odyssey, God willing, to Tokyo and beyond.
Well, thank you so much for that, and look forward to getting to know you guys more, and yeah, hopefully get involved with you guys a little bit more and get to know everybody on this call or everybody I can in the community as best as possible. So thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and if there's any more questions or anything that comes up, I told you guys where I'll be working, so you know where to find me, and don't ever hesitate to reach out.
Wonderful. All right, Shana Tova, thank you.
Shana Tova. Thank you, guys.
Many thanks, Jon, Rabbi Rosenbaum, for a very interesting hour. My name is Ryan Queller, and I'm chair of the JCC's Health and Wellness Committee and member of the Board of Directors. It's my honor to close tonight's program and to express our appreciation for all those who helped to make this evening possible. Many thanks to the Buffalo Jewish Federation for initiating this event, and to Nickel City Jews and Temple Beth Tzedek for co-sponsoring the program with the J. Thanks to Mark Faber, Vice Chair of Nickel City Jews, for getting things started, to Rabbi Rosenbaum for facilitating, and of course to Jon for sharing his powerful and inspiring story with us. Jon, you can count on us as one of the many who will be rooting for Israel in next summer's Olympic Games in Tokyo. Finally, I'd like to give just a little bit of a plug for the JCC. I'd like to take a minute to let everyone know how the JCC is adapting to the realities of the COVID environment. The JCC facilities have been scrubbed and improved, and were recently reviewed and certified by the Erie County Health Department as meeting their requirements for safe operation. Both the downtown and Amherst buildings are open. The gyms, cardio and weights and pools are all operating. Reservations, masks, and social distancing, of course, are observed. Additionally, links to many virtual group exercise classes as well as personal training can be found through the JCC website and the MyJ app. Early childhood and after-school programs are back and growing once again. Cultural Arts is actively programming virtual stage theater readings. Other JCCs across the country have signed on to make our programming available to their patrons too. The virtual Jewish Book Fair this year will be in partnership with the Atlanta JCC, with several big-name best-selling authors already signed up as speakers. check out the JCC website for all the latest happenings. Once again, thank you all for your time tonight. I hope you have a happy and sweet new year and a joyous Sukkot holiday. Thank you very much and good night.